to begin the session shortly. For all the audience, there are still some open seats in the front. So for those of you who are still seated in the back side of the pavilion, you can fill it from the front side first. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to begin the fourth session today of Indonesian Pavilion. The title is Getting Climate Resolved by Bringing Peatland Science to Policy Through South-South and Triangle Cooperation. Before this session is started, I would like to invite here with us Director General of Forest Research and Development and Innovation from Ministry of Environment and Forestry, the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Agus Justianto, to give a keynote speech before the session is opened. To Dr. Agus, the floor is yours.
Honorable delegates, distinguished moderators, speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. Welcome to the session Getting Climate Results by Bringing Peatland Science to Policy through South-South and Triangular Cooperation. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, as we are all aware, peatlands are the vital ecosystem that play important roles in maintaining biodiversity, reducing greenhouse gas emission, providing socio-economic livelihood for ecosystem-dependent communities, and protecting inlands from natural disasters. This ecosystem demonstrates their effectiveness in carbon storage and sink, and the high potential for mitigating climate change when sustainably managed and protected. Despite of the importance of peatlands, they are among the most vulnerable ecosystems that could be threatened by anthropogenic activities. Currently, peatlands are under the combined pressures of an advancing agricultural frontier, extractive economic activities such as gas, petrol, and logging, climate change, more hurricanes and drought and evapotranspiration, growing human population, infrastructure development, and pollution. A major threat to peatlands degradation is draining the peat that will affect ecosystem quality, including biodiversity loss, and increase the greenhouse gas emission. Clearing and draining of peatlands over recent decades has resulted in unprecedented increase in peat fires, which not only produces haze and pollution, but also endangers critical ecological services, which has consequences for human livelihoods and health. Since the enormous amounts of carbon storage on peatland and the catastrophic consequences their drainage has generated in the past, peatlands have been the focus of attention and have been acknowledged as one of the priority ecosystem for climate action through their protection, restoration, and sustainable management. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, in early 2018, global champions for climate action, scientists, policymakers, practitioners were brought together during the Global Peatland Initiative third meeting in Brazzaville. Strong South-South exchange commitments by Indonesian and Congolese governments were captured in the Brazzaville Declaration on Peatlands as an outcome. The declarations encourages cooperation between different government sectors to protect the benefits provided by the Kuvit Central Peatlands. Since then, partners and countries have been working together to mobilize political will and resources to protect the peatlands in the Congos and in the tropics based on the best available science. As a strong South-South effort, the Minister of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia hosted the Minister of Environmental and Tourism Congo and the government representative from the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Democratic Republic of Congo for a working week and to establish the International Tropical Peatland Center, or ITPC. The ITPC was built on the principle through cross-sector collaboration and integration, building a resilient and holistic platform for science, policy and practice, and attracting the best minds working on research and practice in the field. The center encourages and brings together interdisciplinary scientists, researchers, practitioners, and other stakeholders to work together on tropical peatlands research and practice sharing as a key input for policy making. In gaining the global achievement of greenhouse gases emission and reduction and other benefits from peatland protection and management, a UNEA resolution on conservation and sustainable management of peatlands was championed by the government of Indonesia at the fourth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, or UNEA, in March 2019. This global resolution encourages all member states and stakeholders to prioritize peatlands conservation and sustainable management, emphasizing interdisciplinary decision-making and research. To follow up on the implementation of the peatland resolution, it is important to build capacity, identify synergies, and related collaborative actions in managing peatland ecosystems in sustainable manner and safeguarding peatlands ecosystem services that evolve from the interest of relevant international organizations, member states, research institutions, and other stakeholders. Distinguished participants and ladies and gentlemen, to conclude my remarks, as the science on peatland grows, we see how they are champions for climate action, a priority ecosystem for restoration, and a super nature-based solution. In the forming of the decade of ecosystem restoration, it is the time to focus on collaboration across borders to bring science to policy and commit to concrete actions for peatland. I wish this session will provide a strong collaboration of actions on the values of peatlands built on experiences and approaches from interdisciplinary research and science. Thank you and have a fruitful education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for Dr. Agus Justianto for the keynote speech. And now I would like to invite the moderator of the session, Dr. Rosa Maria Roman Cuesta from CIFOR. And please invite the speakers for this session.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Thanks very much, Indonesian government, for having me moderating this session. And please welcome with me a very exciting set of panelists and speakers that will cover the topic of peat from different scales, from global scales towards more regional initiatives and implementation of research like in Congo, and then some step forwards for the future. We have 6 excuses to the DRC colleague. We didn't have your picture, sorry. There is an empty picture there in the middle, sorry about that. But we have excellent 6 speakers that will be discussing different topics. We have Hans Josten from Greifswald University. We have Diana Kopanski, who is coordinating the Global Peatland Initiative. We have Ibu Haruni Krishnawati, that is the lead coordinator of the International Tropical Peatland Center. And then we have Mark Reed, which is a professor of social innovations at Newcastle University. And then we have Cornel Ewango from the University of Kisangani, DRC, that we really appreciate you being here. We know it was a bit difficult to come on last moment, so thanks very much. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who will be Diana Kopanski, who will be enlightening us with the latest developments of the Global Peatland Initiative. Diana, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, everyone, and good to see you here. I have the honor to lead on behalf of the United Nations Environment Program, the Global Peatlands Initiative. It's an initiative to save the peatlands as the world's largest organic carbon stock. It's a partnership that was established in 2016 in response to the peatland fire crisis, as well as some emerging information from the Congos on the actual size of peatlands there. Since then, we've grown to a partnership of 31 different organizations supporting 4 tropical peatland countries, but we really cover the globe. Successful emissions on a global scale requires global action on peatlands and built on experience and approaches from science, policy, innovation, and practice to communities and financing. And keeping peat in the ground is crucial if we're going to make our Paris Agreement targets. Peat also has multiple benefits. So there's biodiversity, there's resilience, there's water quality and storage that also goes along with peatland ecosystems. And our partnership works on 4 priority areas. We really want to help the world know what peatlands are, where they are, and how they're changing. We're working to identify productive wet agriculture uses like polluticulture, ecotourism, to establish livelihoods that are not draining or degrading peatland ecosystems. We're working on financial instruments, mechanisms, and pushing the boundaries to think about investing in nature and nature-based solutions, and looking at these mechanisms as a way to help accelerate the protection, restoration, and sustainable management of peatlands globally. And we work with countries across the globe, both developing and developed countries, to improve, establish policies, institutions, regulations, and actions. And we're here today to talk about this one institution called the International Tropical Peatlands Center. In March this year, Indonesia had a really strong hand in pushing the world to take peatlands issues to the next level. And they negotiated a resolution on the sustainable management and conservation of peatlands. Here it is. We're zooming into the operational paragraphs because this resolution really knits together and identifies gaps that are existing, and it calls on all member states and partners to really work together to advance on these 4 operative paragraphs. It's about sharing information, knowledge, and best practice. It's about continuing and increasing and enhancing interdisciplinary research, which the International Tropical Peatlands Center is directly contributing to. It's about building capacities, promoting multi-stakeholder approach. Interdisciplinary research is critical, and I'd love to hear the conversation later on whether interdisciplinary research in tropical peatlands is happening and how it could happen better. What are those gaps? What sort of capacity building needs do we need to prioritize for work in the Congo to happen effectively? And how do we boost the inclusion of landholders, concession holders, like we saw Katusan and the Sumitomo Forestry Company committed to peatlands management and research? And there's a lot of work to be done on research to monitor the state of peatlands, and there's also need to establish international standards, methods to enable this comparison. And we'll hear from our speakers the work that they've already been doing and the spirit of collaboration that we're coming together to actually establish these global standards for the benefit of all. We really need these interdisciplinary research teams, and the International Tropical Peatlands Center can be a critical hub that brings together these multidisciplinary research teams. Through partnerships with universities, private sector, researchers, clusters of researchers, and feeding and facilitating interaction with governments. We also think that it's essential to think about setting up research stations because international tropical peatlands research isn't easy and the investment costs are high. So if we collaborate to establish research centers, promote fellowships, partnerships, programs, and also collectively work on common research questions together, I think that we can really advance the decision-making as well as the financing needed to invest in peatlands. Better understanding and improved conservation and sustainable management of tropical peatlands is one of the fundamental efforts of the Global Peatlands Initiative. So please be part of the solution. Join us to raise the voice, to highlight peatlands as a priority nature-based solution for investment and for the future. Thank you.
Diana, I'm going to invite you to sit down, and I'm actually going to invite the panelists to sit down, please, on the stand. Thank you. Thanks very much. The way we're going to organize the session is we will have first the presentation, and then we'll open space for questions. So if you have questions, please write them down, and we will have 15-20 minutes for questions after all the presentations are finished, okay? If someone has an urgent clarification, please raise your hand, and after each speaker, we will have a little bit of time. Thanks very much, Diana. Our next speaker is going to be Haruni, right? Hans, sorry about that. So, Hans Jossen from the Greifswald Maya Center, the floor is yours.
This is one of the last ones. Can we start with the first one?
Excuse me, Hans.
Good. Okay, good afternoon. I was asked to tell you a little bit about the Greifswald Maya Center. Why Greifswald? Greifswald is a very old university, one of the oldest universities of Europe, and we already do for 200 years research on peatlands. The Greifswald Maya Center consists actually out of 3 organizations that were that had to work together for external joint branding and internal coordinated planning. So nowadays they are working together since 2015 as the Greifswald Maya Center. The Greifswald Maya Center is a strategic cooperation between these institutions with as major topics climate protection, biodiversity, other ecosystem services, the knowledge, the valuation and the protection of them, and of course also sustainable use, of which paludiculture, the wet agriculture, is one of our major topics. Another issue that we address is innovative funding. Our vision is a world in which peatlands are seen and understood as vital and vulnerable systems, where natural peatlands are conserved, where degraded peatlands are restored, and any use of peatlands is sustainable. And we want ourselves to play a role in it as an interface between science, policy, and practice, everywhere in the world where necessary. Of course, it builds on people. At the moment, we have 75 scientists operating in Greifswald on one spot, varying from economist, hydrologist, to ecologist, everything dealing with the same subject. We have a global orientation. Here are some of the spots where we are working, have been working in the last years, specifically with respect to the collecting and integrating of data and the developing of concepts and methodologies. But of course, our geographical situation implies that also a lot of our research and implementation projects are focusing on temperate latitudes. The three organizations in the Greifswald Mile Center have their own specialization. Of course, the university deals with science, the Zuko Foundation deals with implementation, and Dune is specifically busy with political advice. One of the major building blocks of the Greifswald Mile Center is our global peatland database, in which we collect data on the distribution, extent, and status of peatlands worldwide. We do that by the integration of data and by own mapping, and we produce various products like the ones that have been shown below. One of them I want to highlight. It's a major book we produced on the peatlands of Europe, covering 49 countries, a huge book of which the first copy was offered to Ibu Nir from Indonesia 2 years ago on the climate COP. It was a very nice example of a heavy north-south transfer, because the book weighted 5% of the weight of Ibu Nur. Another important database is the database of potential paludiculture plants, in which we collect data on plants that can be used under wet agriculture and forestry. We currently have portraits of over 1,000 plant species. Also there, exchange is taking place. Here, Pak Havas, the ambassador of Indonesia in Germany, inspecting our paludiculture demonstration sites in northeastern Germany. Also, lobby is very important, and we are very active in that. This is a picture of the day before yesterday, when our people were lobbying in Brussels to get paludiculture recognized as agriculture in the common agricultural policy of the European Union. Also, that is necessary. Another important building block of the Greifswald Mile Center is its peatland library, that contains at the moment some 25,000 publications, largely books about peatlands. And it is a special collection of the library of Greifswald University, and it brings also something. We have, for example, the old manuscripts of Betje Polak, a Dutch researcher before the Second World War, who did major research in peatlands, and she described Rawalabok on Java. And this was a peatland that had gone unknown. So on the basis of these manuscripts, we went out looking for that and rediscovered Rawalabok in 2013. And this was so special that even National Geographic Indonesia paid attention to that, that even Java, this important political center of Indonesia, had its own peatland. An example of how we are working with the Greifswald Mile Center with respect to rewetting and paludiculture. The university does the research, the Zuko Foundation the implementation, and Dune does the political advice. So for example, we have at the university now a very big project, 5 million euros, in which we study how peat formation occurs after rewetting drained peatlands. Very important to know the benefits of paludiculture for the climate. We have done large restoration activities in China, for which in 2017 we won the Lighthouse Award of the UNFCCC. And for example, for our own federal state, we have made a map for the suitability of peatlands for paludiculture, so that the country immediately can see where can you implement paludiculture in a sensible way. The GMC is one of the early founding members of the Global Peatland Initiative. We want to see in the Global Peatlands Initiative a similar teamwork as in the Greifswald Mile Center with respect to science, policy and implementation, simply to address the large and global peatland challenges that are there in a joint way. The Greifswald Mile Center is always open for cooperation, because it is necessary and because it makes fun. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hans. So now we're moving out of temperate and boreal forests and we're going to tropical forests. And we are going to invite Ibu Haruni Krishnawati. She is the leader coordinator of the International Tropical Peatland Center, and she's going to explain us a bit more what the International Tropical Peatland Center is doing. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Haruni Krishnawati. I'm actually senior researcher working at the Ministry of Environment of Forestry Republic of Indonesia under Forest Research and Development Center, the Research Development and Innovation Agency. And early this year, in March, I've been assigned to be a lead coordinator for International Tropical Peatland Center, or ITPC. Some of you may already know about this, and this is hosted by the government of Indonesia, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Republic of Indonesia. At this session, I would like to share a little bit about the ITPC. The history of ITPC dates back to the Brazzaville. Some of you maybe already have this information that during the third Global Peatland Initiative Partnership Meeting in March 2018, when the three governments, the Republic of Indonesia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Republic of Congo, ROC, have jointly signed the declaration. We call this the Brazzaville Declarations, to protect the tropical peatlands in Congo Basin and the tropics. And the three governments commit to build the International Tropical Peatland Center to improve the capacity of GPI partners countries on peatlands management. And then later, late in October 2018, the International Tropical Peatland Center has been launched. And this is the government of Indonesia, the Minister of Environment and Forestry invite the minister from DRC, ROC, and Peru to launch the International Tropical Peatland Center and sign the joint declaration, which is saying about the importance of tropical peatlands at the global, regional, and national level in addressing climate change, protecting biodiversity, environment, and contributing to the social, economic welfare of people. And also the need to increase respective capacity through collaboration to promote best practices for conservation and sustainable management in tropical peatlands. And there is a common interest in tropical peatland and ongoing efforts by the government and partners to conserve and manage tropical peatlands in sustainable manners, and need to strengthen the collaboration and networking. The objective of ITPC is actually to ensure that the policy makers, practitioners, and community have access to sound, credible, and legitimate information, analysis, and all other tools needed to design and implement conservation and sustainable management of tropical peatlands. The ITPC can be used as the home base of the global tropical peatland science, capacity building efforts, and strategic developments for the tropical countries. And this is the scope of the activities, including the following. The first thing is compiling the best practice regarding the all sustainable management in tropical countries in data field laboratory through measurement, reporting, and verifications, including the greenhouse gas emissions, fire risk, carbon stock and extra, biodiversity, and other things, and then producing accurate and precise data through inventory and mappings, reducing risk, early warning and risk management, finding new pathway for green developments through integrated sustainable peatland management, ensuring participation and rights, including socio-economic aspect, setting up the management, governance, and partnership structure, supporting policy and measure, including NDCs, MRV, REDD+ activity on peatlands, and then dissemination, engagement, and outreach. As a new initiative, ITPC actually has been done a lot of efforts in promoting the the centers and also collaborating with many entities in many sectors since the Brazzaville declarations, actually. Sorry. Oh, yeah. So we have done a lot of promotion in the high-level meetings and the international events, as well as regional and national level. And as you see, a lot of international events that we have conducted and we had hosted and promoting the importance of tropical peatland in the global networks. There is importance to strengthen the capacity and collaboration actions. As we see, the ITPC can be used as a go-to space for South-South cooperation, which will support the dissemination of strategy and practices for tropical peatland management through coordinating and supporting collaborative international relationships and connecting different stakeholders. ITPC can be used to conduct and disseminate scientific research on tropical peatland management for sustainable developments. It's also become a center of excellence for tropical peatland research to support policy developments. And as well, the ITPC provides capacity building and technical services. This is the objective or the goals of establishment of ITPC to support the GPI countries, peatland partner countries. And we know that there's a lot of science, there is a lot of knowledge, experience going on peatland has been widely available and is increasing rapidly in recent years. Data and experience has been available elsewhere, and this is need to be synergized in order to provide the right recommendation for the policy decision, especially in tropical peatland conservation and sustainable management. And there is a need to gather the available information and knowledge and develop further capacity to improve science-based action, not only in Indonesia, but also in other tropical peatlands countries, DRC, ROC, Congo, and also welcome to other tropical peatland countries. There is plenty of room, of opportunity for collaborations. So ITPC welcome and invite other countries, particularly with peatlands, international organizations, NGOs, donors, private sectors, civil society, research institutions, and other stakeholders to contribute and join the work of ITPC. There's opportunity for cooperation and sharing of lessons learned in peatland policy and decision-making process. There are a variety of mechanisms or partnership and collaboration to support and contribute ITPC. I think this is all that I can share about ITPC. Welcome for the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Haruni. And certainly having International Tropical Peatland Center as a way to compile all these best practices and management for the tropical part of peatlands, it's extremely important and good timing. Let me now introduce you Cornel Ewango from the University of Kisangani, and he will be explaining us a bit how the research gets into implementation in one of the most important pits in Africa, which is the Cuvette Central. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everybody. This is just a short overview of the Central Congo Basin peatland, since I was not really planning to give a talk, but my colleague did come and I add quickly to fill the gap. So as all of you know, the Congo Basin peatland is the last discovery in the world, and it's one of the largest peatland in the tropical forest. So it's lying between the two Congos, the Congo-Kinshasa and Congo-Brazzaville, and covering around 190,000 square kilometers, and it's about 40% between the interflave of the Congo rivers, Bangi rivers, and major lakes in the area. So specifically for our Congos, because it's the last where the work is ongoing now, we are mapping on the province of Ecuador, and it started in the Congo-Brazzaville, and now we are moving there in the north of Congo-Kinshasa. But we still have a large area in the south of Ecuador line that is not covered yet. So effort is undergoing for mapping and estimating the thickness of the peatlands and also studying the flora of what is building those peatlands in that large areas, but more still to be done. And this is what effort we are doing in our Congo. So far we planned 75 kilometers to cover for the documentation of vegetation and also hydrology and also topography of those peatlands. But what is very important is that it's very large areas. This is some of the picture of in the field, but we're still working on, and very tiny have been covered so far. So the important for us, while we are working on science, moving with science, there is also a very huge effort to be done on the political science side. And as scientists, we are working also with the policy, the decision makers within the two countries to let people know about the importance of the tropical forest peatlands in the central Congo basin. So specifically in our countries, Congo-Kinshasa, the government have established a unit of peatland management. And with that unit at the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development, they have got support from the Global Peatland Initiative, running some workshop and sensitization campaign with local community and also social civil society and member of the government to let them know the importance and to work very hard to protect those peatlands. And also between the two Congos, there have been efforts to work together to manage how to study, to work on those peatlands, and also to work together to organize. We are planning to organize the third meeting of Congo tropical forest peatlands in Congo by next year with support of GPI. And specifically, although the two countries joined it, the ITPC, but that have been on the political side. And we as scientists, we have not been involved. So the government have been a bit late to work with scientists on their countries so that they get very involved on decision making and also sharing science knowledge that we are getting from scientific evidence on the field. So effort has to be done, and thanks to the University of Leeds, the two countries are working on multidisciplinary research, and specifically two PhD students have been involving on the Congo-Brazzaville and one from DRC on studying those peatlands. But more has to be done because that are just documenting and evaluating, quantifying carbon on the peatlands. But there are also socio-economic aspects to be covered, and we are more counting on international community scientists to come on board so that they give us a hand to work on that area so that we know exactly how to better manage on those peatlands and go forward to sustainable management plan on that area. So we are counting a lot to ITCP to give us a hand so that we get more people to come in board so that we continue what we have started so far. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Cornel. I think that was an excellent presentation of difficulties also and the challenges of cross-boundary management of peats in the two Congos. And congratulations for the work done so far. Let me now give the floor to Mark Reed. Mark Reed is working as a professor at the University of Newcastle, and he will be sharing some results from the series of workshops on the core outcome sets regarding the need for collaboration, interdisciplinary research, and science for consistency and robust support for policymaking. Mark, the floor is yours.
I'm going to move these up. There we go. No, I'm okay. I think, can you hear me okay? No. You can't hear me. I can speak up. It's all good. Great. Thank you. So research, as we know, has shown that protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing our peatlands is a crucial thing for climate change. The task of creating national peatland policy is, of course, far from simple. Benefits for the climate, on one hand, may come at the expense of benefits for local communities. And interventions that work in one location may not work in another and could have disastrous effects if we apply them through a one-size-fits-all approach. Now, it's easy to criticize policymakers when things go wrong, but I think that researchers may also have to take some of the blame. I say this because researchers have a nasty habit of making recommendations from single studies. I know I've been guilty of this myself. My funders asked me to write a policy brief based on my latest project, and I tried desperately to find something relevant to say to the policy community. But what happens when another researcher comes along with contradictory findings and makes opposing recommendations to the very people I have just briefed? Maybe one of us got the wrong answer. Or perhaps we actually measured different things in different ways. Or maybe just differences between our study sites might account for the apparent contradiction. Clearly, this is no way to make good policy. And the civil servants among us know, of course, that their task is to synthesize evidence from the patchwork of multiple studies and sites, rather than relying on single studies, no matter how persuasive the evidence from that one study might appear. But there's a problem. The majority of systematic reviews are unable to find enough high-quality evidence to synthesize because everyone is measuring different things. Even if two groups measure the same thing, say water table depth, they may measure it in very different ways using different methods, making the data, again, unsynthesizable. Even if they measure the same thing in the same way, the two groups may present their data in ways that prevent synthesis. For example, omitting crucial contextual data, such as the location or the altitude at which that data was collected. So I don't know whether I'm comparing like with like. In this talk, I'm going to describe a South-South collaboration to standardize peatland data collection based on a workshop that was hosted by ITPC earlier this year. Our goal is ambitious. We want to change the way peatland data is collected and reported around the world so that more and more people collect data on the same variables in ways that can be synthesized. Ultimately, the goal is to facilitate meta-analysis that can enable more evidence-based policy and practice. I'm going to explain how we're doing this in a moment, but first, I want to pull all of this out to a global policy context with a good news story. My colleagues and I have been monitoring progress towards a 2016 IUCN Global Peatlands Resolution, which was reflected in new resolutions on global peatlands earlier this year in the UN Environment Assembly and the Ramsar Convention in 2018. The findings of our survey are surprisingly positive. The majority of countries responding to the survey had or were developing national strategies to protect and restore their peatlands. Priority peatlands on the slide here are identified on the basis of the amount of peatland in the country and the amount of emissions coming from those peatlands. Those with strategies are in green, those with strategies under development are in amber, and those not coloured either don't have a strategy or did not respond to our request for information. The great news is 8 out of 12 priority countries with the largest peatland area and emissions had a national strategy. In total, 27 national peatland strategies were found. Most of these included coordination of action to protect existing peatlands, work to assess the distribution and condition of peatlands, and policies to protect local communities. Few, however, included policies to sustainably manage peatlands, to monitor greenhouse gas emissions coming from those peatlands, policies to stop peat extraction, or ways of leveraging private investment into peatland restoration. As part of the survey, we found a number of common barriers, and as you might expect, the number one barrier was lack of resources, but as you can see from the slide, there are a number of other key barriers as well. One of the ways that we can overcome some of these barriers is through research. And so linked to this work, I am coordinating a working group for the Peatlands, Global Peatlands Initiative to identify national research funding opportunities and policy-relevant research priorities that can be coordinated internationally with funding from the UN system. We're focusing where possible on South-South collaborations, in particular between GPI countries, so the Congos, Indonesia, and Peru in particular. But as you can see from this slide, many of the research funders are located in the global north. So far, the group has identified 23 priority research questions on topics ranging from climate change and peatland degradation through to social science questions around environmental governance and blended finance. And I would like to invite you to join the working group. Can my Indonesian colleagues make sure that people have a copy of this form? If you don't, put up your hand. You have an opportunity not only to join that working group, but on that form to propose your own priority research questions and your own national research funders so that we can map both the questions and the funders as comprehensively as possible. A key research priority emerging from this group's work, and one of the key barriers that we found in our survey, was the challenges faced by mapping the location and condition of peatlands around the world. And one of the key barriers to achieving that is, of course, the data that exists. And so here I want to revisit the challenge I posed at the start of my talk, and we're going to finish with this topic. So the challenge is we're all measuring different things in different ways, and we're reporting our findings differently. For me, data that cannot be widely used is the ultimate fieldwork fail. If you want to laugh, check out the fieldwork fail hashtag and book, which sadly features a cartoon of me running around a Ugandan forest semi-naked. But more seriously, the upshot of all of this is, of course, that many decisions in policy and practice are informed by the results of single studies, which are later contradicted very often by the findings of subsequent research, as I outlined in the introduction. So in response to this, I'm coordinating a team with Dr. Gav Stewart and Dr. Dylan Young from Newcastle, the Global Peatlands Initiative, and ITPC to standardize the collection of environmental data so it can be combined from multiple sites and studies to better inform policy and practice. After trialing this process in UK peatlands, we are now replicating this for tropical peatlands. A number of those present here were met in Indonesia earlier this year to identify the key variables that should, in theory, be measured across all tropical peatlands. We're going to be supplementing these variables and going through a prioritization process next year to identify the core variables that the majority of experts agree need to be measured for tropical peatlands. Now, we've just completed this step in our UK trial, and this is the sort of list that emerges in theory. Can a colleague at the back advance the slide? There we go. Fantastic. So this is the climatic data set and just a portion of that you can see on the screen. And looking at the list in the top 5, you can see that there's strong agreement in the green column on the right-hand side that we need to measure rate of peat accumulation, peatland extent, and peat decomposition. And so these will be in the core set of key variables we will recommend for measurement in the UK. However, there is less agreement over the importance of measuring peat build-up behind dams or dust losses. That doesn't mean that those won't ever be measured. If they're important for your particular study, then of course you should prioritize them. But you'll do so now in the knowledge that there may be few others measuring these variables, and as a result, there's a lower likelihood that your data will be able to be combined into future meta-analyses to inform policy and practice. We're now moving to methods and identifying reliable methods that could be used to collect data for each of those priority variables, ranging from highly accurate but often very expensive and time-consuming methods, which are typically the domain of researchers, to methods that can be used by non-researchers and those with limited resources. And this is important if we want to engage communities in citizen science, or if we want to enable practitioners and other organizations with limited resources to collect reliable data on the key variables that have been prioritized. And again, if you want to take part in the next step to prioritize tropical peatland variables, then we would love to work with you. We're planning an event, and it will also be possible to help with this electronically, so indicate your interest on the form which is coming around if you want to be invited and take part in that. To conclude, I think that if we're serious about evidence-based policy and practice, then South-South initiatives like the identification of key variables for tropical peatlands are of crucial importance. This initiative won't instantly enable us to harmonize data to create accurate global peatland maps, or provide evidence synthesis to support the next decision you need to make. But we must stop and think about how we collect and report data now if we want the data we collect to enable more evidence-based policy and practice in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me ask you a question, because you left some of these questionnaires on the chairs. So those of you who would like to participate into the prioritization of the variables around monitoring peat, please fill them up and give them to him at the end of the event, right? Perfect. Thanks very much. Well, thanks very much to all the speakers for these very interesting presentations. And now we're going to open time for questions and answers. So, do we have a micro to pass around? Yes, perfect. Perfect. So, anyone in the audience would like to ask something about the ITPC, about the Global Peatland Initiative, about the efforts to standardize methodologies for peat data collection, or about the initiatives that are going on in the Congos? Okay, well, Julie, please. There is a micro coming.
Thanks. I'm Julie. I work at the Center for International Forestry Research, writing and editing. And I guess I have a couple of questions. And one is, how does the data that you're trying to systematize or organize, how does that fit in with NDCs, if it does? And also, I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about the Congo in terms of some of the potential risks involved in that ecosystem, the peatlands there.
Perfect. Should we start with Mark? And then we'll give the floor to Corneille.
Great. So in terms of the relevance of this for NDCs, I think that there's a huge amount of data being collected and reported as part of that process, and the more data that is collected in synthesizable ways increases our capacity globally then to synthesize that and to be able to then say things at a global level in comparative terms much more accurately than if we are all reporting in slightly different ways using different methods, different reporting protocols. We're advocating open science with this, and there's no one right way of doing that, but one way which we're considering trying to promote is something called peat Data Hub, which would mean that there is a central place in the same way that we have with forest plots and other initiatives like this, where if you want international peatland data in standardized, comparable ways, you can go to that one place to get it. But it all depends on whether those collecting the data are willing to put it into that place. But I think it's important that it is open, and the more standardized, the more we can use that internationally.
Perfect. Let me also highlight a comment to what he was mentioning. Under the IPCC, countries that need to report to the UNFCCC, they have to use the IPCC guidelines. So in 2013, they were developing the wetland supplement, which would include reporting for peats. Okay? So the way to go is certainly this standardization process is extremely important so that we can compare apples with apples. But then in terms of greenhouse gas inventory and then incorporating that and creating baselines for NDCs, countries have to start being capacitized, and capacity building is one of our goals also for CIFOR on this type of guidelines, like the 2013 wetland supplement. Some information extra about Congo and the risks that Congo is going through.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Congo, the Central Congo Basin has the largest peatlands, but it has also many risks we are seeing, overseeing, because as you see, if you have got a chance to read the paper published this year by Miles and others, collaborators, it shows the overlapping of some industrial activities surrounding the peatlands. Specifically, oil drilling is overlapping in some areas with the peatlands, and also timber exploitation. There are some concessions near or overlapping with the peatlands. And within that also, there is artisanal logging done by local communities who are relying to do those resources. And recently, there are some countries who are overlooking areas, lands for developing agribusiness on those areas. And they are tackling peatlands as priority to develop their agrobusiness. That are some of important risks we are overseeing to our peatland areas. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wango. Also, some of the properties of these peats is that they are ombrotrophic. They depend on rainfall. Therefore, if there is a decrease of rainfall, they will also be affected. So it's a combination of climate also and anthropogenic threats. More questions from the floor? If not, I have a few for you. Let me heat up the atmosphere with a few questions. I think what is interesting now is that we are expanding the research from more classical temperate and boreal peats into the tropics. And I think this is a new frontier. A few years or a few decades ago, no one believed that there would be peat in the tropics because it's so hot that they thought that the organic matter was going to decompose. The thing is that now, because the organic matter is covered by water, then the organic matter doesn't decompose, and this is the problem with draining. So my question for you is, we need to catch up also a bit with all the research that has been done in other climatic regions and improve interdisciplinarity for the tropical ecosystems and peats. So what do you think, this is a question to all the panelists, what do you think, which disciplines are lacking right now in terms of tropical peat research, particularly tropical peat research? So is peatland research already interdisciplinary? What should we be focusing on?
I would say, as an environmental social scientist, I may be slightly biased on this. I had lunch with Simon Lewis and my colleague here yesterday to discuss needs in the Congo, and the response was there is no social science happening pretty much in the Congos at the moment. But to give you a flavour of some of the questions that we've identified in the social science, we've got, for example, how can peatlands be governed effectively for vulnerable groups in conflict-prone areas, fragile states, and borderlands? And then in peatland payment for ecosystem service schemes, what are the trade-offs between increasing investment versus increasing scheme costs when quantifying the benefits of restoration, and can higher prices and more quantified schemes overcome barriers to participation from land managers who may be put off by the complexity and red tape? So some very detailed but important questions around governance and around blended finance, that if we have answers to these, we don't just have theory, we now know in practice how some of the ideas we're proposing on the ground might actually work, and we can start getting the engagement of the land managers and the people who ultimately need to be part of this and need to benefit.
Absolutely. Maybe the role of communities?
Yeah, I think, as I said, our area is the last known, but it's just known geographically, but we don't know what is inside. There is a need, as Mark said, we have limited understanding of peatland extent in the Congo Basin, and we need to continue mapping. It's our priority. And also within that, we should be moving with ecosystem services accounting, because many people are relying on peatlands, and how they do to protect them, and what is their uptake levels of natural resources in the peatlands, so that we continue better manage the peatlands. And also we should not wait too long. Although they're still being intact, but we should start monitoring them. What is going on under climate change? And the hydrology, as I know on my country, for example, for the Lake Maindombe is facing crisis on water. That's partly because I think the surrounding forests have been deforested. So we should start monitoring and the peatlands, and also the Ubangi River is facing the same, and the Sanga region in the other Congo. We still have to know and to monitor the hydrology of the area, because it's more impacting also the fisheries and the fish stocks on that areas.
Thank you very much. Diana?
Thanks. I think it's quite interesting as we look about the other disciplines that are there. I think that in the research realm, a lot of these places have high spiritual value, that people that have been living there really understand them and know them. And how do we get the voice of the people that have been living in harmony and protecting these areas, some of the indigenous people that are the best custodians of the tropical rainforests and peatlands? I think that that is quite an interesting area of research that, for example, all the work, especially in the DR Congo and the Republic of Congo, the remoteness of this place, the cost of actually getting research in there. If you have 3 people in the boat, or 12, let's have 12. You know, we're talking about efficiencies here. So I think that if we can look at these problems and value them beyond the carbon, beyond the payment aspect, and capture the real spiritual value of those places, I think that that's quite an important aspect. Thanks.
All these things are very important and should be addressed, of course. I think that it is also necessary to address peatlands as special ecosystems. And my experience is that most of the things that go wrong is because peatlands are addressed as if they are something else. Peatlands can only be understood on the basis of what they are. They are a very nice balance between plant growth, water, and peat. And they are inseparable connected with each other. And specifically in tropical peats, even stronger than in other peatlands in the world, it is so that if you change one of these components, you change them all. Maybe not immediately, but on the long run. It is the plant growth that determines that peat accumulation can take place. That peat is conserved is caused by the fact that there is water saturation. The peat itself determines how the water is flowing, and the water level determines again which vegetation is growing. So it is so strongly interlinked that if you do not understand these interlinkages, that you make mistakes. And of course, the indigenous people who live there might have had a feeling for these things, and they have honored this relationship. But it is not the issue that we have to imitate the local people. The issue is that other demands come from outside, from people who do not want to live like the indigenous people. They want to do different things. You could easily conserve all these peatlands by adapting the behavior of the indigenous people. It has been shown that it works. But that is not what is the issue. The issue is that we do not want to live like the indigenous people, and we want to get things out of it. And therefore you have to understand these peatlands. These peatlands are not so incredibly complex. They are, but you have to know them. It is the task of science to change something that looks like something that is complex into things that are simple. Peatlands are actually rather simple. It's my experience after studying peatlands for 60 years. Peatlands are actually rather simple. The problem is that they are addressed from the wrong attitude. People should learn to think like peatlands, with these interconnections that are inseparable. And then you can deal with peatlands in a decent way. Not when you only pick out one element, try to harvest the vegetation, try to influence the water, then you build in disasters on all these other levels.
Thank you, Hans. Absolutely, hydrological component and all this combination of different factors that makes peat special is extremely important. Actually, I was thinking about this hydrological importance and thinking of the Okavango River Delta. I encourage all of you to look at this National Geographic report. It's a documentary this year that talks about the Okavango pits in the headwaters, and they talk about how fires are changing the hydrology and affecting the entire Okavango River Delta. So that's an extremely important example of how changing the sphagnum and the hydrology affects the entire livelihood of the Okavango. People from the audience, you have the floor for questions. Otherwise, we'll make some more questions. Anyone is curious about some more dynamics? Okay. Let me ask you something else then to the panelists. We've been hearing about the need for interdisciplinary research. We've been hearing about the need for compiling best practices. One of the problems that we have right now with land management is that we have this multitude of objectives: adaptation, mitigation, restoration, decarbonization practices. We have to do all of these objectives at once. So what would you suggest would be your priority for capacity building? And let me also put the example of Peru. CIFOR is working with peatlands in Peru in collaboration with the Global Peatland Initiative. And one of the first issues that we have is that wetland is not legally defined. If you don't have wetland legally defined, you cannot have a national strategy, you cannot protect it. So one of the first things, talking about multidisciplinarity, is the legal framework. Nothing that is not defined in your country will be managed, will be preserved, will be conserved. So one of our lessons learned with our experience in Peru, please make sure that wetlands have a legal definition in your country so that you can then protect them and you can then manage them. So let me do the question again. What about prioritization with all this range of disciplines, social, ecological, NDCs? What do you think we should tackle first? It's not an easy question. Anyone would like to answer what is the capacity building approach? I know it's not easy, yeah? Hands up. Yeah, hands on that.
Yeah, I think that the most important capacity that you have is that you develop, train people that really try to understand peatlands. As I said, it is not so complex, but it is a different way of thinking. We noticed in the Climate Convention that I have been negotiating for years in the Climate Convention about peatlands, and you notice that it doesn't work because most of the people who talk about land use and land use change are foresters, and they think that a peatland is a forest. For example, Indonesia, when they started, they wrote in their documents that a peatland only emits greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, in the first 3 years after drainage. This comes from thinking like a forester who knows that if you cut a forest, then the forest is gone and it's gone in the air. But peatlands are different. Peatlands are therefore different because after you have drained them, they keep on emitting as long as there is peat. And that can be 1,000 years. In the Netherlands, where I come from, the peatlands are emitting already for 1,000 years. This is a different way of thinking. If you decrease the rate of deforestation, you decrease the emissions. If you decrease the rate of peatland drainage, you increase the emissions because the emissions from newly drained peat add to the emissions of the peats that have already been drained. It is a different way of thinking, and you have to get accustomed with this way of thinking. And you must be careful, and as long as you do not understand the basic issues of peatlands, the best capacity that you have is stay away from these peatlands, because they are time bombs when you do the wrong things.
Applying the precautionary measure, right? Mark, would you like to add something about prioritization of capacity building?
Yeah, thanks. I'll give you two answers. The obvious one is for me, knowledge is power. And when we don't have robust data, then we can't make robust decisions. And just simply knowing what to measure is an incredibly important thing. So I'm research lead for the IUCN's UK peatland program. And in the UK, which is a data-rich country, we have projects from government, from NGOs coming to us on a regular basis saying, we've restored these peat bogs. What should we measure? We've got this budget to do monitoring, but we don't know what to measure. And I have to send them to various researchers who then will tell them different things. And so just simply knowing what to measure before we even know how to measure that, and standardizing that means we have better data, which means we make better decisions. So for me, that's the key capacity. But at a higher level than that, I'm going to say that what we need is empathy. So to build on what Hans said and what Diana said, essentially what Hans is saying is that I empathize with the peat bog. I think I put myself in the shoes of the peat bog, of now non-human entities, the species that live there, for example. And I imagine what it might be like to be that forest-dependent community, living in that peatland, understanding their culture, their spirituality, rather than just seeing this through my Western eyes as something that might look beautiful, that I should keep people out of. And when we do that, then for me, you both see the simplicity of this, because now the veil is removed and you see things clearly. But also you see the inherent complexity of all of the trade-offs that exist between the social and the ecological and all the other aspects of these systems.
We have a few minutes to wrap up, unless there is any question or curiosity from the audience. Okay, well, thanks everyone for being here. Thank you very much to our speakers, especially to our friend Cornel. Thanks very much for DRC for being here. And just highlighting, it's an exciting moment. And it's an exciting moment that Indonesia is leading with the ITPC. I think Indonesia has learned the hard way what it is to have draining problems in their peats, okay? I think they already understand the difficulties for management and what it means to drain peats in a way that then have all these issues about climate change. I think they are leading because they've suffered it in their countries. And I think that it's a very exciting moment for ITPC to lead this call for improving knowledge, for South-South cooperation, for interdisciplinarity. Within the GPI initiative, then we make this call for anyone, any of the countries that have peats that would like to join the ITPC, that would like to join the Global Peatland Initiative, to share data, to improve capacity, please come to us. And also remember to fill in the questionnaire that Mark has given to you in order to hear your voices about what would be your prioritization for peatland mapping and measuring and monitoring. Thanks very much. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you very much for Ms. Rosa and all the honorable speakers. Before we are leaving, conclude the session, there is a token of appreciation from the Minister of Environment and Forestry. So I would like to invite from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry to from Dr. Ati. Maybe you can give out the token of appreciation to all the speaker and moderator. I'm sorry. And now, for all of you, we're going to take a photo session. Please move a little bit because the lighting is. Eti, Bu Eti, foto bareng. Foto bareng. Dari Bu Haruni katanya.